Hello, everyone. My name is Devorah Governelli.
And I'm Carrie Parker.
And we are so excited, super thrilled. We are here at the very beginning of 2026. And we are so excited to kick off a new year and a new look at awesome films. And today we actually wanted to touch on one that hits its 20th anniversary this year. The film is Stranger Than Fiction. We thought it was quite appropriate where there's a nice little focus on time. And we are here at the beginning of the year. So we're going to kick it over to Carrie. Get us jump started.
Will Ferrell is the character, Harold Crick, the Emma Thompson's author. And we don't know her name until later. She's just the narrator's voice for the beginning part. And we see her and we experience her. And we find out her name is Karen Eiffel and she is the author. Will Ferrell, being a comedian and starting on SNL, and pretty much everybody's used to him being the fool, the jester type in different movies. This was a nice step into dramatic work. And it's kind of along the same lines of Adam Sandler, Jim Carrey. They all classically have made those moves, and they do very well. Right? Because despite the fact that we might look at them as the comedians also can do serious, right? They can do dramatic. That's what makes them comedians. They understand so well that difference between up and down and light and dark. And they, as comedians, they try to share light. Whereas in the dramas, they know that it can get a little low and they make sure to skirt that line so it doesn't get too low, it doesn't get too dark. And it's been great having them be those people for our generations. I think that speaks hugely on a lot of what the comedian gentlemen have talked about, and why Stranger Than Fiction's actually really amazing is the depth. But that idea of light and dark, and it's the people who shine light the brightest, they are not only doing it for others, they're doing it for themselves because they know how dark the darkness can get. And Jim Carrey has been honest about it and open, and I love that. I love the metaphor he used about depression is your body telling you that you can't play that role anymore, essentially. And that's true. Like, literally, that's what mental health concerns are. They are your body saying, we can't follow this path anymore. We can't keep moving forward in this direction. Like, that's not what we were built for. And so if you ever experience that, that's all it should be. It should only ever be a statement on that your path is not going the right direction. It's not about you as a person being broken, you as a person not being capable of something, but just the reality of that's not what you were meant for. And that depression, anxiety episode, as we call them in mental health, it's about you need to figure out what's stuck. And so that's also, going back to the movie, kind of what I love about the narrative device that was used, the storytelling device of the wristwatch. I absolutely adore that an inanimate object, right, a supposedly trivial object, is seen as this machine of the gods, as we called it back in theater survey, but so that it propels him on his supposed path or his fate, right? It is the catalyst. So
yeah, it's almost like a sentient being in his world. I actually worked at Kohl's when this movie came out, and they had a special edition Stranger Than Fiction watch that you could buy.
No way.
Yeah. I'll look on eBay, see if you can still get your hands on that. Because yeah, they basically recreated the watch from the film, and it was for sale. I remember loving the movie and then seeing the watch and be like, oh, this is so cool. And I should have just bought one and hung on to it all these years.
It would be such niche, sentimental fangirling to have one. And it's also why I'm a nerd for some Viktor Frankl and Man's Search for Meaning. But that reality of we as humans, above all else, we need a higher purpose. And I love that that's kind of what the catalyst also is in this. I love it because it is very much that narrative device of a catalyst that makes the character change its path, and the fact that Emma Thompson was narrating that, and the idea that she talked about the one person who gave him the time and it was 3 minutes different, and how important that fact on that day was. I mean, who would have thought, right? But then we all do that. When things happen to us, we go, well, this wouldn't have happened if that hadn't happened. And this, and we try to pinpoint those moments so that we can figure out how to avoid those situations again. But I mean, is that futile? Is that completely like, you know?
If it helps us not repeat a mistake we don't want to repeat and have any control over, then it's worth your while. If it's something that you would never encounter again, or you're never going to be able to course correct it, then yes, some reflection is very important for our lives. That's a very important essence of being able to properly move forward, is taking time to reflect. But you also can cross the line into it being unhealthy and just wallowing and living in the what ifs instead of moving forward, which is what The Watch and Emma Thompson, these two characters, are trying to kind of help, and Dustin Hoffman's character are trying to help Harold with, is the looking forward and doing something with his life. Watching this film for the first time in a good handful of years, it did take me back to our Maven days, because when we were operating that historic cinema, we had a gentleman named Gary, and he also was a homeless gentleman. And especially throughout the month of January and February, you know, it's cold outside. It's Utah where this historic cinema is. So he'd come in and ask if he could just hang out in the lobby, and we'd stand and chat, and I'd give him a bag of popcorn, and sometimes he'd watch a little part of a movie. And then when he was ready to move on, he'd head out. But yeah, he would just come in almost every day. And so watching that, I was like, oh, it makes me think of Gary and how we used to make sure he had popcorn and, you know, warm up before he headed back outside.
Yes.
You have to have the groundedness of the real world, because like you said earlier, this is a story that's extremely meta. You know, that's not something that happens. In fact, he goes to a healthcare professional and says, this is what's happening. What do I do? And she 3 times is like, sorry to be a broken record.
Schizophrenia.
This is schizophrenia. But, you know, we're in this almost fantasy film, essentially, because that isn't something that happens in the real world. What I loved about it is that it's meta, and then it almost became meta again, because you've got the fact that the character being written is a real person and can hear the author's voice narrating in his head. And then you've got Dustin Hoffman's character that comes in and shines a light on storytelling. He has that scene that it actually makes me think of that scene from 17 again, with Zac Efron and his best friend, where he starts going through, this is what a sacred story is like. Here's the elements of the hero's journey. So tell me what's going on so we can figure out how to find your guide and find your way back to your real self. He has that with Dustin Hoffman. You've got Dustin Hoffman asking him all these silly questions, and Harold Crick is like, why are you asking me this? And he's like, because these are very crucial elements of storytelling. So if I can get this information from you, if I can get this data, I might be able to help you. So I love that, especially in a medium of storytelling that takes every other art form and puts it together. This one leans so heavy into the written word and used it so eloquently. It's one of my favorite parts of the film, is that just, it's like the English language is at its optimum level, and we get to just keep hearing it coming out of Emma Thompson's mouth and hearing her accent and her voice, which is just so lovely and divine.
But I also love that he gave him the idea, and we see the little notebook with the tally mark for comedy or tragedy, and he's like, I know this isn't going to make any sense to you, but I think I'm living in a tragedy. And he mopes away, and I'm just like, Will Ferrell. It's so cute.
It's so cute. And that again falls into the importance of reflection, because that's kind of his first action item he's given by Dustin Hoffman is, you know, do the tally mark, you know, take a list. And oh man, when he opens that book and there's like only 4 in comedy, and then the whole other page is filled under tragedy. But it's, it, like you were talking about, in our last video, the whole like stages of grief that are so important. You have to go through stages in order to make improvements. And the first one is acceptance. And so this little book is providing him an opportunity for reflection, and it's giving him the chance to accept, I'm going about my life day by day by day by day, and I'm not putting any purpose into it. I'm not putting any life into my life. And so, because that, he's very frustrated at first when he comes back with the results to Dustin Hoffman. He's like, yeah, I think I'm in a tragedy. And he's like, okay, well, then you need to just accept you're going to die. Everybody dies. So why don't you just go ahead and live your life to your fullest? If you know you're going to go, eat pancakes every day and do all the things that you wish you were doing. And he gets mad at first. He's like, so wait, between death and pancakes, you're telling me to pick pancakes? And he's like, no, they're like, what you need to be thinking about in the context of that scenario is what is the quality of the life and what's the quality of the pancakes, and that right there can help you to move forward with mindful choices that can actually turn your life into an enriching one. And maybe that's the best thing you can do in your situation. And that, I think, is one of the best lessons we pull from that movie, because that is a very universal, relatable topic of what is the quality of life you are choosing to put into your life, and what are the things you could shift right now or incrementally over time to infuse your life with the level of quality you want in your life. And I love that moment, because then everything gets better. Can we just talk for 5 seconds about the flowers scene? When he hands her the box and she's like, I'll pay for it. She's so mad at him for not taking her gift. I'll pay for it. What are they? And he says, flowers. And that double
I got 2 flowers. Yes.
Of the little bags, different types of flowers. It's her so much. And it is the gateway that he's able to, actually develop a relationship with her and add that quality of life. And add music into his life and help his friend. And
today we're going to talk about stages of change, because that's also what you're identifying, which is like, it's again what you're talking about without how you choose to live your life. And it's a very existential concept, but it's also very built on our social discourses, our societal discourses of what is happiness, what is success. And so if you look at Harold, he was doing everything by the book. I tend to identify it as duty driven. People who are driven and their purpose is duty. So he is doing it by the book all day, every day. He is fulfilling the expectation that he is a good worker. He is a good citizen. He is law abiding. He's not purposefully ever in anybody's way, right? He's just literally like flying right here under the radar of, I'm never going to be a problem. But as the existential dilemma is dropped, is he really living? And honestly, that's what everyone's trying to figure out. But that reality of work-life balance, the idea of we work 5 days a week waiting for the weekend, for those 2 days where we don't have to go to work and we get to do whatever we want. And half the time that's catching up with life so that we can go to work again on Monday and not feel overwhelmed or behind. And that balance of how do we implement little bits of living into our everyday so that even if we go to work, we still feel like we have life and we are living in those hours that we have around work. And that's ultimately what this is. And that's why this story is interesting, because he doesn't have an aversion to people. He's just never taken the initiative or necessarily felt confident enough to, and his wristwatch becomes the catalyst of, you've been like sliding along, just kind of floating along for so long, 12 years, I think they say in the beginning, that it's time, man. It's literally time. His wristwatch is like, it is time, and I am telling you the time. And that metaphor alone is also so meta, right? The idea that the time telling device is telling him what time it is, literally and figuratively, is adorable. So,
and it's adding yet another layer that we see that he really is a good guy. He's a really good guy. You know, the more that he's interacting with Anna, the more she sees that and she starts to fall for him. And, you know, at the end, even where you just see like she's smitten forever when she's like,
yeah.
happened? And he's like, I pushed a boy out from getting hit from a bus. And she was like, you saved a little boy. You know, he's such a good guy. And that's why, like you said earlier, I love the choice that's made, especially as a person who has spent their career in the art of storytelling and the production of storytelling and just what it takes physically and time-wise and money and just your artistic ability, interacting with other humans. Like literally every resource that exists at our fingertips goes into that process, and it can sometimes feel like you're on the edge, like you've just given everything you can and you're going to succumb to it. And so I really appreciate that as she gets to the end and she has to decide, is getting this story into the world more important, or is this man's life more important? And that is, like you said, the existential crisis that she's stuck in. And as a person who has done storytelling as a living, I understand that. It speaks so powerfully to me. I can understand how a film made by filmmakers, that they're telling the story of which one's more important, getting the story in the world, saving the man. I've been there before where I've got the important family event and I'm ready to say no to that because I've got the show and it opens in 2 weeks and I have to keep devoting 93 hours a week to it. And I need to remind myself, nope, the family thing's more important. This show's going to come and go, but you will regret if you miss out on this thing. I've constantly had to be mindful of that. And that's why that line that you said earlier, that essentially becomes her choice. Dustin Hoffman's a little disappointed, which seems almost morbid on the surface, but he does understand. He, like, his whole life is explaining why storytelling is so important. So he's disappointed that she made the choice she did, but she points out, isn't it better to keep a man like that alive? Isn't it better for a man like that to be in the world? Like, yes, maybe this story would have been my masterpiece and it would have impacted people in a very important way and it would have done really important things in the world. But my choice is that I think keeping this man in the world would actually do more. It's something I can live with better and that he can literally live with better and all those things. So, you know, you see there's also some really great foreshadowing they're giving you throughout the film. You see the little boy getting the bike. You see the woman who's getting the job, so that you've got the culmination at the end of all of it coming together. And her choice also made it so that that little boy gets to live and that woman gets to keep her job. And how he's able to get Tony Hale, his best friend, he's able to get him into space camp like he always wanted. And so you already get to see the first like 2 or 3 ripples of how that choice she made did make the world a better place. So I love this story. It is a really perfect story to watch at the beginning of a year, to be reminded, make sure you're putting quality into your life, make sure you're making meaningful choices that are going to help to not only enrich yourself, but enrich the people around you.
Right. And the most New Year's of resolution style is the idea of how can I choose to live a little bit more for myself this year, while also being the productive human who has a purpose, right? And we find a job that gives us purpose and fulfills us in that way, but also where we get to be an individual who's making sure that we have things that make us want to keep living, right? Like for Mr. Harold Crick, his Anna Pascal, right? And I do also love how it's almost like a consolation prize. The idea that Dustin Hoffman's professor finally gets to meet her, because he mentions how he's written her all these letters. She even mentions how she loved the letters. And so the fact that the trade-off for it's not going to be my masterpiece is she literally hands it to him and he finally meets her. And I loved that moment too. And she looked so healthy. That was probably the best, healthiest, focused, glowing, not worn down. Like maybe she's slowed down on some of the smoking presentation that she had. So costuming, makeup wise, using that to kind of also show that she feels a lot better because it was weighing on her, trying to figure out, initially trying to establish the death as what was real, what was not cliche, what was possible. And I feel that, like, as someone who loves storytelling, has imagined stories in my head, and those, if something doesn't feel genuine and feels forced, you just can't do it. It's just not right. And so that was the writer's block, is she was just convinced, she couldn't figure it out. And maybe it's because he wasn't supposed to die. And I also love that concept too, is that it was because maybe she was trying too hard to kill him. And maybe this one character that she finally wrote was not supposed to die.
Well, because we find out that she's been working on this book for literally 10 years.
10 years.
Because I think it was one of Kristen Chenoweth's little cameo appearances ever in film. And she's interviewing Emma Thompson, and Dustin Hoffman will be like, oh, this is a 10-year-old interview. So we know that she's been in writer's block stage for a long, like a decade. That's a long time to live in that, especially when that is your living and that is like what you create and what you put in the world. And so to have writer's block for 10 years, you were talking about kind of the costume and hair and makeup design for her for the majority of the film. I mean, obviously that's where she's supposed to be. If she's been living in that state for a decade, that's crazy. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, thank you again for joining us. We are so excited to be kicking off 2026. This really is such a great film for that, as we focus on the element of time, as well as making sure that we're making mindful choices and infusing our life with the level of quality that we want to have in our lives. And we'll look forward to a year full of wonderful episodes, full of the fantastic films we love so much.
And I'm so excited to be spending my New Year's with this one, who is making it oh so adventurous and wholesome. Yes. All right. That's the forgiveness kiss. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. Let us know what you're looking forward to this year, what you hope to make changes in this year for yourself and for others.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. Happy New Year. See you next time.
Bye.